Now, the problem with trying to keep the Gregorian Saturday as always being Sabbath is that this throws the original Sabbath out of its creation sequence. The names on the Gregorian week wander through the numbered days. Your birth date is a perfect example of this. The date of your birth never changes, but the named day of the week it falls on from year to year does. So it is with the Sabbath. The numbered day never changes. Genesis 2:2-3 sets the tone and establishes the first reason for Sabbath keeping. We are to follow his example. Because he specifically rested on the seventh day of creation, the Sabbath has universal validity. It doesn't belong to the Jews, it belongs to everyone, and is an example from creation, not from one of the patriarchs, nor from Moses, nor from the Jews, as I said, because there was no Jews in the beginning, just his people. David found favor with Eloah and asked that he might procure a dwelling place for him. It was Solomon which built the house. However, the Most High does not live in houses made by men, as the prophets say, Isaiah 66 verse 1. So says Yahweh, heaven is my throne, the earth the footstool of my feet. Where then is the house that you built for me? And where is the place of my rest? He's asking this question because his place of rest had already been created by himself in the beginning. It belonged to the seventh day. The seventh day, not just a seventh day, and without doubt, Exodus 20 verses 8 through 11 shows that the keeping of it as a day of worship has its foundation firmly anchored in Genesis 1 and 2. At the end of the creation sequence, Yahweh created and sanctified an environment that would play a major role in producing eternal and everlasting life. Through the creation of the Sabbath, Yahweh shows that the life-producing process is not completed with just the physical environment. The Sabbath plays an important role in producing spiritual life, a quality of life having a dimension that the physical alone cannot supply. Toward this end, no other day can be devoted to the Sabbath's quality of significance. There is a valid reason for this. The Sabbath is not merely an afterthought of a tremendous creation, but a deliberate memorializing of the most enduring thing man knows, time. The Sabbath memorializes the first week of creation and sets the cycle until the first week comes around again in its cyclic trek. The Creator's timepiece is very simple to use. In the very first book of the Bible, we are given the framework for a week, 7 days. This is the very first thing we learn. We learn within that week that the lights in the heavens were given duties for tracking the set times of the Most High. So far, pretty simple. It is through other historical writings that we come to understand how the priests were taught to use the lights. The Dead Sea Scrolls, for example, confirm that the priests used the due east rising of the sun to start the counting of the annual feasts. They believed the due east rising of the sun was the mark given the greater luminary on the day that time was set into motion in the heavens. This fourth day sign also confirmed that the first Sabbath would be in 3 days. What a blessing we were given to know the first Sabbath! But see how Hillel, how Hasatan has deceived the masses by changing the times of the Most High, just as Scripture told us he would. Yet there are those who desire to understand our Creator's division of days, but confound it with man-made systems. We see some who are teaching that once the dewy sunrise is established, that we wait for the next Wednesday, or in some cases the closest Wednesday to the dewy sunrise, to start the yearly count of the feasts. Doing the priesthood a disservice by calling this the Zadokite calendar, proclaiming that the Dead Sea Scrolls confirms that the Gregorian Wednesday is the fourth day, thus keeping the day called Saturday aligned to the seventh day of creation. They try to follow, perhaps unknowingly, in the footsteps of those who were given over to set days that led to death in the tabernacle of Saturn.
At Sweet Bee Organics, we believe in the power of nature's ingredients to nurture your body and soul. Unlike conventional products filled with synthetic additives and questionable ingredients.
To death in the tabernacle of Saturn. Our Creator gave his set times to Adam, Enoch, Noah, Moses, Aaron, David, and Solomon, although Solomon threw them aside due to the influences of his wives, and all the prophets after them. None of them would have known what a Wednesday even was. I mean, can you imagine a conversation between our Creator and Moses on Mount Sinai? And here's Yahweh saying, Moses, this is how you will never lose the creation Sabbath. Watch for the due east rising of the great fireball I place in the heavens. This is for you to use as a marker. Then wait. Moses, looking kind of surprised, wait? Wait for what, Eloah? And Yahweh says, wait for Wednesday, Moses. And Moses says, what is a Wednesday, Eloah? And Yahweh says, something man will create in a couple thousand years. Now, I know I'm being silly, but I really don't think that's how any conversation went. Do you? It's pretty ridiculous when you really think about it. When we wait in order to keep the Sabbath on a certain named day, it removes it from its celestial, fixed seventh day given at creation. They argue that the calendar based on creation disrupts the Sabbath's seventh-day cycle. Hence, they take control of the Sabbath like their forefathers did in the wilderness. There is only one cycle of creation, where our Creator blessed the first seventh day as the day of rest, and every seventh day throughout the first cycle, to be repeated cycle after cycle. If we carry the counting over into the new creation cycle without letting creation set the Sabbath, then we will have the Sabbath showing up on the sixth day of creation, then the fifth day of creation, then the fourth, moving backwards through the days. Now, we have been tracking the days via the heavenly lights for years. And what I have come to know is that the first Sabbath has not moved from the counted day that falls on the Gregorian March 23rd. This has been so since we started applying the creation count. It has not ever changed from that, using the memorial of the due east rising of the sun to anchor us to day 4 of creation. It's just so simple. Now, some calendar people will start counting the feasts on the day after East is established, therefore making East last and not first, as we're told it's to be. And then they will add an additional sunrise into the creation week in order to harmonize the solar cycle of 365.24 days with the Enochian Jubilee premise of 364 days. So the creation year was 364 days. Now we have a solar cycle that has to be reckoned within that. The solar cycle of 365.24 days, right? So what is actually happening, though, is this causes the Sabbath to fall on the 8th sunrise and not the 7th. So when they create this pause day, they call it a pause day
or some call it the abominable day in reference to Job. Now, how can day 4 of creation be an abominable day?
In all actuality, this causes the Sabbath to fall on the 8th sunrise and not the 7th. But if asked, this seems not to be a problem because I'm told that one of the days isn't counted. But there is a problem. We cannot ignore a sunrise a whole day. Nowhere in Scripture is an extra day mentioned or even hinted at during the first week. 7 sunrises, starting with, "Then Eloah said, let light be, and there was light," through to the 7th sunrise, which is the day we rest. But both the Sabbath and the festal counts can be anchored for us by the 4th day confirmation. If we anchor our counting on any other day than the one that establishes East, we would be disrupting the counting of the Creator's appointments. The Sabbath is not tied to Saturn or any other day other than that established at creation. Come out of her, my people. Come out of the man-made dogma and traditions. Our Creator made it simple to find his 7th day memorial, which is the mark of his people. Now, obedience does not go unrewarded. As most of the world suffers trials and difficulties because of its carnal ways, blessings and protection are promised to those who keep the Sabbath. Jeremiah 17, verses 24 and 25. "And it shall come to pass, if you diligently hearken unto me, says Yahweh, to bring in no burden through the gates of the city on the Sabbath day, but hallow the Sabbath day to do no work therein, then shall there enter into the gates of this city kings and princes sitting upon the throne of David, riding in chariots and on horses, and this city shall remain forever." Isaiah 56:2 confirms Jeremiah's words. Blessed is the man that keeps the Sabbath from polluting it. This undeniable truth is the beauty of doing what Yahweh commands. He rewards us richly for doing so. When we offend him, adverse consequences are just as sure. Jeremiah 17:27. "And it will be, if you should not hearken to me, and sanctify the day of the Sabbaths, to lift no burdens, and to not enter through the gate of Jerusalem in the day of the Sabbaths, then I will kindle a fire in her gates, and I shall devour the plazas of Jerusalem, and it shall not be extinguished." It does not matter what career we have chosen. The Sabbath is still binding. Nehemiah shows that regular business transactions, buying and selling, are forbidden on the Sabbath. But simply refraining from our daily work on the Sabbath is not all that Yahweh requires of us. Our attitudes as well as our response to obeying his will are of great importance. If we keep from working on the Sabbath, but yearn for the next day where we can seek riches, profit, or fun, the prophet Amos calls us sinners.
Have you heard? Reading glasses.
The same is true of using the Sabbath as a holiday to read profane material, to gather for purely social reasons, to attend sporting events, or to seek any pleasure. If we use the Sabbath for these purposes, we are not obeying Yahweh's decree. Isaiah gives us clear instructions for the Sabbath day and blessings that will be poured out for obedience. Isaiah 58:13, "If you turn your foot away because of the Sabbath, from doing what you please on my holy days, and call the Sabbath a delight, to the holiness of Yahweh glorified, and shall glorify him to the holiness of not doing your own ways, from finding your own pleasures or speaking your own words. The prophet Ezekiel wrote about the importance of Yahweh's decrees. If we truly wish to follow Yahweh's will, how we worship him is just as crucial as when we meet with him to do so. Our actions have holy effects. They must be in tune with the Creator's master plan. Consider a few of the many examples from Scripture showing that when Yahweh prescribes a certain action, he expects nothing less than complete obedience. We were blessed with the word of our Creator, giving us an anchor from the beginning, the due east sunrise, memorializing the fourth day of creation, so that we would never lose the first Sabbath of creation in order to keep his word pure. Baruch Hashem. So this is the end of our study, Numbering the Sabbath, and I pray that it has